So the name of the project is Pet Food Ingredient and Production Analysis, and the project came about it actually started with a project we've been doing for the United Soybean Board for a lot of years, clear back to 2014, where we were estimating the feed consumption primarily for soy-related ingredients, but we were also collecting corn and the dried distiller grains and soybean meal and all these other ingredients. As part of that project, we were doing some very basic estimates of pet food, what was going into pet food, but only for soybean meal. And so a couple different organizations had found that research online, because it's published every year, and they were wondering if we could do more detailed analysis on what goes into pet foods. And so what we did is we worked with the American Feed Industry Association, and then also the Pet Food Institute and North American Renderers Association. They were very interested to know what was going into pet food, because they expected that there would be a lot of, from the American Feed Industry Association side and from the North American Renderers, that there would be quite a bit of their ingredients that they produce or that they represent going into pet foods. And so what we did is worked out the scope of that project, which required us to buy the Nielsen's grocery scanner data, which they have available obviously for human food, but they also have it for pet food. And so they bought the data and we analyzed it. And what came from Nielsen was mostly titles of food, who the manufacturers were, and what the volumes, both value and volumes, quantity-wise, was being sold for that year. And what it did not include was the ingredient panels. It didn't include the guaranteed analysis panel, and it didn't include how many calories were in the food. So what we had to do from there is we had to identify which ones made up the vast majority of sales by volume with the Nielsen data. And we went online to Chewy.com and Walmart.com and some other e-retailers that sell pet foods, and we were able to get the ingredient panels, and we were able to get the guaranteed analyses, and we were able to get the caloric content. And what we did with that is, just like in human food, on an ingredient panel for pet food, the higher it is up in the label, the more prevalent it is in the pet food. And so we know from an inclusion rate standpoint that if it's earlier in the list, it's going to be a higher inclusion rate. And using a linear model to estimate what was in those pet foods based on what the guaranteed analysis was and the calories, we were able to back into what the ingredients were. And what that did was help the 3 clients understand what the volumes were, where the ingredients were coming from, and what types of food use different types of ingredients. And it's been a very interesting project that they've really appreciated and used many, many times over the last several years. People continue to call on when they find the report, and they in turn will pass on people that are asking them questions that they may not feel comfortable answering to us. And so we've actually been able to do some other work, and we've improved the process on how we've done that over the years. And we're hoping to be able to do an update of that project coming up here this year. Did, yes, and it was linear programming is something that's been, it's taught in college, and it's used, nutritionists use it a lot to develop rations for livestock and poultry. But as far as how we used it, we used the ingredient panels, so we were kind of, I don't know if reverse engineering is the right word, but we backed into what it was, as opposed to just what a nutritionist would traditionally do is understand what the dairy cattle need, for example, and they'll see what ingredients are available, and they'll understand what type of ingredients cows will actually eat. They'll know what the nutritional characteristics are of those ingredients, and then they'll work to balance it under a mostly least cost environment. And I say mostly least cost, but sometimes there's certain things that are part of a ingredient that they can't, just because it's cheap, they can't feed only that ingredient. And there might be handling characteristics that they have to account for. And so when we did the work for the pet food project, we accounted for those types of things, because pet food, as we know, comes in many different forms. It can be wet, it can be frozen, dry, kibbles, there's lots of forms that pet food come in. So we had to account for some of those qualitative characteristics that were important. Yeah, so the clients were organizations that represent, so the American Feed Industry Association represents those businesses in the country that manufacture feed. The Pet Food Institute represents the pet food manufacturers, and then the North American Renderers Association represents those facilities in the country that take what's left of, when a hog is slaughtered or when a cow is slaughtered, it takes the remnants and it makes they do their best to use everything from those animals. And so those clients were looking at it more of a informational and to convey what their industry does, as opposed to change diets for the pet foods. If you think of like Mars, that makes a lot of the pet foods, or Blue Buffalo, they have their own team that will understand how they need to formulate their rations. Ours is more of the pet foods have already been made, and because they're very hesitant to include what's in their pet foods, they're just not going to tell us, then we have to, the information we provide is more for the general public that would consume the data, not necessarily the private companies, because they've got huge teams that they rely on to formulate and source their materials, their ingredients. Decently sized report that we put together. Our reports typically range from anywhere from 10 pages. We have one that we do every year that's about almost 900 pages. And that 900 page one is one that we did the very, very basic analysis on pet food and only looked at soybean products. And so this is in a way related to that, but we've done a lot different, done it a lot differently now. But when we do an update, the reason why a report gets to a certain length like that is we do spend a lot of time. We have depending on the project, we'll have quite a bit of front matter where we talk about, it's like an introduction to set the stage for why the question and why the analysis is being done in the first place. And then we describe our methodology, which in this case, there's quite a bit of methodology, because there's a lot of steps and some nuances to it. And so we will describe what we did in quite a bit of detail. And then we have a results section that we will present all of the results, and almost everything we do has some data tables, whether it's in Excel or it's almost always in Excel, but we will copy over some of those tables into the report, which can take up some space. But we also have, when we conclude a project, we also include the source files as well. So the results can vary quite a bit on the length of the results section. And then we have a conclusions where we just talk about the implications for what we've done, and then we'll have sources and document where we got our information from. And then at the very front of the report, we have our executive summary, which is usually between 2 and 5 pages long. We've found a lot of enjoyment in doing this. We've had some very good people on our team that have developed the methodology that is unique, and we've used some of this work in the private industry, and we get feedback that based on their industry experience that our estimates are really close. We're never going to be exact just because of the nature of the data that we're working with, but we're usually within 10% of what they feel like the inclusion and overall use of a given ingredient is. So it's been a really good kind of a leveraging of our adaptation of some work that we've done in production animal feed ingredient estimation to more of a almost like a family, because a lot of people consider their pets as family, and so it's been fun to leverage what we've learned elsewhere and use it in something like this.